7:43. Now, the most contentious issue to stir this year's parliamentary audit has undoubtedly been the revelation of accounting fraud at private kindergartens. Not just one or two, but thousands of cases have seen kindergartens accused of exploiting the government subsidy they receive to buy things like designer handbags or to pay for karaoke rooms and more, leaving parents feeling betrayed and frankly outraged. Our first interview on this subject this morning is with Dr. Kim Kun-kyu, Professor of Early Childhood Education at Delaware State University. Thank you very much for joining us.
Hi, Alex.
And I want to just point out your own intriguing CV, because you went to study in the US and became a professor, but you had been a daycare a teacher as well here at a kindergarten in Korea. Can you tell us a bit more about that experience?
Yeah, sure. I worked as a teacher at daycare center and a kindergarten in Korea for about 5 years. When I first studied, I faced some difficulties trying to find my identity as a male early childhood educator, as I had no role model or mentors. Children and parents alike had a doubt about having a male teacher, but parents soon welcomed the idea of having a male teacher who could be a positive male role model to their children who often lacked a good and frequent interaction with their fathers. Some children even called me an uncle or dad. So my working in a preschool as a teacher provided me a valuable first-hand experience to help me understand how to help prepare students to be a good teachers in preschools.
I mean, that in itself is, I think, a fascinating angle. As a parent, I don't think I've ever seen a male teacher of my kids when they've been very young, and that's perhaps a problem that we do need to address more seriously. But coming to this subject, what prompted you to choose the career that you've done and to actually then pursue further studies over there in the US?
I love children and wanted to be a pioneer as a male early childhood educator. I did not have a great relationship with my father personally, and that triggered me to be interested in the impact of fathers on their children's social competence and early childhood.
But did you also notice any major problems with the system here? Like, for example, when you heard about this accounting fraud scandal circling private kindergartens in this country, what were your thoughts towards that?
Oh, yeah. I think the accounting fraud by private kindergartens that has surfaced is really unfortunate. Korea's private kindergarten did not started as a part of a public school system. No one can dispute that private kindergartens have served as a foundation of Korea's early childhood education for the last 30 years. They have contributed to achieving tremendous educational milestones in terms of quality of teachers and programs, which are truly excellent and very competitive compared to programs from other countries. Based on what I have observed of the years in studying early childhood education in various countries, it seems that the issue of accounting fraud started with the blurring of the line between private and public education as the government started providing public funding to private schools and implementing new curriculum.
Do you think it was a good decision to disclose the names of kindergartens that have been accused?
Yeah. Every society has a process that the majority can relate to and accept. Matters related to education should be free from politics. A politician and mass media releasing accounting audit report and fraudulent kindergarten and directors in many ways is problematic. If there was any accounting fraud, the Ministry of Education and related department should have first gone through administrative process of making appropriate collective measures to be at warning and fine or closure. If there is any disagreement to the collective measures, then they would need to settle that through the court. In the U.S., when a private preschool receives a federal or state government funding, and they are required to provide a yearly financial audit by a third-party accountant to ensure proper employment of those funds rather than using a government accounting system. There are guidelines provided for auditors and preschool and types of corrective measures required based on the types of fraudulent activity.
One of the issues as well, aside from the anger, we've seen parents complain that they sensed something was wrong with the management of their kids' kindergartens, but they felt also that they had to kind of keep that to themselves. They didn't want to cause a stir for fear that it would cause a disadvantage for their children or might even lead to revenge of some kind. Is that a valid concern, do you think, that parents have?
Yeah, I also think this is unfortunate. I believe children and parents are the most hurt and isolated from this incident. In the United States, there are regular PTA meetings to communicate and discuss the school's financials, educational programs, and curriculum and events. They also have a system in place for parents to be able to anonymously report about issues with the schools. Parents can also go on our government website to check on complaints filed and how those have been resolved. The current situation in which parents' rights and demands are easily dismissed in the midst of government and private kindergarten disputes should be changed and improved.
We should point out that we've seen a kind of response from some of the kindergartens, the Korea Kindergarten Association, saying that a very small number of these irregularities constitute serious accounting fraud. And we're going to continue to look at some of this during the course of today's show. But again, from the parents' point of view, they've been baffled because it's difficult to find kindergartens that you are able to send your children to. I mean, there are waiting lists. It's not easy at all. Despite our low birth rate, actually, kindergartens are quite full, especially the ones that come recommended. But the ones, as you know, we haven't really touched on it too much when you said children are the ones that are affected by this. In your opinion, how are children actually perceiving what's going on? They're very young for a start. Like, how would children, do you think, perceive the revelations here if they're not able to say, digest the news?
All right. I believe children are sensitive to changes in their situation and are aware of changes in their surroundings. I am sure this situation is affecting the children and could make them feel anxious and unsettled.
Yeah, because again, with some kindergartens being defiant and threatening to shut down their institutions, it's put at risk the place for children to go during the daytime, to see their friends, to do all the things that we consider normal. Can you offer any tips on how parents should communicate with their children about the scandal?
Yeah, I think it's important to have an honest and open discussion with children about the current situation, but in ways that children can understand. Using the tips from Dr. Gonzalez Mina, who is one of the experts in homeschool partnership on communication and problem solving, have your children share about their thoughts and on the situation, and explain your thought to your children in ways that he or she can understand. if the child is old enough to process and understand. And you can also go further by discussing what has happened and what we know and what you and the child would like to see happen.
Now, when I go to pick up my kids from kindergarten, I do so as a father. And I've got to say, it's mostly mothers who are picking up their kids that I see, but there are also fathers who do so. Yet the complaints we're hearing are mostly women, mostly mothers who are being quoted by the local media. That may be simply because the media outlets are asking mothers because they think that's what the public wants to read. I mean, there could be a number of reasons for that. But to me, it also ties back to what you were saying before about a kind of problem with men looking after young children in the first place in kindergartens. What's your insight into this? And what's your view of the fact that the complaints seem to be female-driven?
In Korea, and fathers often take a backseat when it comes to children's education. Is it true? I would like to see Korean fathers be more involved and voicing their opinion.
Do you think that if fathers were more involved generally, it would help male teachers like yourself
Sure.
get over the issues you faced before?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, a final question then for you before we let you go today. Would you like to suggest any solutions to clean up kindergartens to bring about a more ideal scenario going forward?
Yeah, sure. The government needs to acknowledge the historical background of how private kindergarten started and how they have contributed to the advancement of early childhood education in Korea. Rather than enforcing government financial accounting system on private kindergartens, they should come up with an auditing system that both parties can agree on. In addition, they need to have regulations and laws in place along with the auditing system. Private kindergartens should be willing to share their financials and how they are using public and private funds. If there are accounting problems, they need to prove that they are working on correcting those problems. Another consideration is making kindergartens and especially a K grade as part of a public system like in the U.S. Then allowing diverse preschools, both public and private, for younger children.
Yeah.
Provide the subsidies to parents directly and have the parents choose which preschool they want to enroll their children.
Dr. Kim, thank you very much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much, Alex.